Hi guys, welcome to DnD Tales Part 7. 2 long stories this time. Please, if you enjoy these videos, smash the like and subscribe button for me. That time a level 5 party got 200,000 gold pieces. This was a little while ago, but probably one of the funniest stories that I have from the campaign I'm in right now. For context, I'm playing a tiefling bard and the other members of my party that play a role in this are a Goliath barbarian and an Artemis blood hunter. Our party was sent to find a mysterious orb and a staff that had been stolen from a dwarf merchant named Fredged. After traveling around for a while, exploring various caves and dungeons including one where we encountered and, somehow, killed a Dracolich, we found the staff. Having completed half of our mission, we headed out of the dungeon and explored the only room that we skipped on the way out. In this room were 3 chests with a fairly simple puzzle needed to open them. Our DM put inside a unique and overpowered magic item for each of us in these chests. Mine was a cloak of greater invisibility. I was planning on multi-classing into rogue later on and wrote my backstory for that purpose. After completing half of our first mission and with no leads on the orb, we decided to head back to Fredged, but not before stopping in at 2 Stars, the largest city in the area. While I stopped at a blacksmith to get a couple of daggers made from the claw of the Dracolich we killed, our barbarian and blood hunter stopped by a local magic item shop. It became quickly obvious that the dark elf that ran this shop didn't sell any actual magic items and was, in fact, an asshole. We never figured out exactly what he was doing, but the magic items that he sold only worked for him. He would sell them and quickly say that it wasn't his fault that they broke. He talked down to our party members, tried to scam them, and was just a general sleazeball. My party members left to come find me without buying anything. Our barbarian came and told me what happened. "Wanna go mess with him?" I asked. He agreed. I put on my cloak of invisibility and went in with the barbarian back to the shop. While the shop owner was dealing with a few unsatisfied customers, I told my partner to stand in front of me while I rifled through the glass cabinet looking for something I could use to play a prank. I eventually found a music box and closed the cabinet just as the other customers were leaving in a huff. I told the barbarian to distract him and I placed the music box on the ground a ways behind him. I went up and touched his back to let him know that I was ready and he pointed over to the box. The dark elf looked confused, but didn't pay much mind to it. He blamed our barbarian for knocking it over. He made a scene, distracting the shop owner long enough for me to go back over and pick up the music box. A little more arguing later, the elf notices that the box has disappeared. Now a little more confused, the shopkeep blames my partner again. He's playing his part well and rolls really well for deception. He changes the subject after I get back up next to him and gets him to look the other way as I place the box on the desk they were talking over. The elf lets out a little yelp and, again, blames the barbarian even though it couldn't have been him. Our barbarian brings up the possibility that it could be cursed. At this the elf's blood runs cold and he starts stammering. He's distracted enough that I can pick up the music box again. After letting him freak out a little more, I attempt to jump over the counter without him noticing. I roll a really bad acrobatics check, but our barbarian manages to cover for me by knocking everything over by accident. I quietly set the music box down on the ground behind the shopkeep and opened it up, letting the music play. Ever so slowly, he turns around, now shaking. "You didn't do that, did you?" he says to the barbarian. "No way, that thing is cursed." And he storms out of the store, again rolling well for deception. Before the shopkeep can turn around again, I pick up the music box and close it. He's just about broken at this point, holding his head and his hands on the counter and muttering to himself. I slyly place the box next to him. He glances over, screams, and throws the box across the room, breaking it. A few moments of silence go by of him just staring at the box. Then, I use thaumaturgy to make the faint sound of the music that played a little bit ago. This guy just leaves, saying how he's not going to deal with this, leaving me alone and unnoticed in his store. I grab what I believe to be a small pouch of money and leave. It turns out, our DM plans how much money shopkeeps have in advance. It also turns out that this particular guy had a bag of holding filled to the brim with 200,000 gold. It's been about 5 months since this happened and I haven't had any repercussions and we haven't even been able to use 1/10 of that money. We all learned a valuable lesson that day, our DM in particular. If you are going to give someone a bag of holding filled with gold, don't make them an asshole. Out of retirement, a level 20 adventure. Grumbly Newsweather sat in his office signing off on another zoning proposal. Governing the largest city on the continent involved a lot of busy work like this, but he did so love the roar of approval the crowd gave each time he made public appearance. This was so much better than being a traveling minstrel. Yet, he sometimes found himself missing that nomadic lifestyle. The halfling, lost in memories, almost fell from his chair as a man in fine clothes appeared out of thin air in his office. Recovering from the shock, Grumbly shouted, "Iranus. It's so good to see you." The half-elf smiled. "Grumbly, my friend, it's great to see you too. How has government life been treating you?" Grumbly gestured to the paperwork on his desk. "Occasionally gets a little dull, but I do so love the crowds." Iranus laughed. In all the time they'd traveled together, Grumbly had wanted nothing more than great fame. His landslide election victory was proof he had accomplished that. After a bit of catching up, Iranus' expression turned serious. "Grumbly, I need your help." Grumbly's expression mirrored his. "Of course, anything. Do you recall those ruins we got a bad feeling about in our adventuring days, out in the desert?" "I believe so, Sarmuth. Yes. Yes. My research finally uncovered their significance." "What are they?" "They serve as a backdoor into our world from the inferno." Grumbly startled. "You mean those creatures we bound there? They could return at any moment. And they could bring far worse. So what are we going to do about it?" "We pick up Strug and Trina, and we end this once and for all." Trina sat at his desk, finishing up the editing on his latest research into the behavioral patterns of Hydra, when he heard a knock at his door. Trina looked up as his pseudo-dragon flew from its perch and fluttered excitedly. Iranus opened the door and he and Grumbly stepped inside. Iranus. "Grumbly. It's great to see you. How have you been?" "Hey Trina, still keeping yourself busy here at the guild I see," Grumbly said with a smile. "Good morning my useless apprentice," Iranus said to the young elf, smirking. Trina sputtered slightly. "Come now Iranus, I haven't been your apprentice in years. I'm the head of the biology department now." Iranus smiled. "But you're still useless." There was a silence, and then both men burst out laughing. Grumbly joined them. After regaining his composure, Iranus said, "I need your help." Iranus quickly ran through with Trina what he'd told Grumbly. "Let's get going immediately then," Trina said. "Come Arthur." His excitable little dragon flew to his shoulder. Grumbly, "Still know the circle for Strug's place?" Iranus asked. "Yeah," Grumbly replied, pulling some chalk and drawing a circle on the ground. The group stepped into the circle and vanished. Miles underground, a huge dwarf was asleep on an uncomfortable stone throne. Iranus, Grumbly, and Trina appeared in a gilded circle a few feet from the throne. "Strug," Grumbly excitably said, jumping into the air to punch the enormous dwarf on the shoulder. The dwarf shook awake. "Huh? What?" "Grumbly." Strug pulled up his trousers and stood, wrapping his massive arm around Grumbly. "I missed you little buddy." "Strug, why did you boulderloo around the teleportation circle?" Iranus asked. "It looked cool," the dwarf replied. The group moved to a different room and spent some time catching up. Grumbly explained the situation to Strug, who simply replied, "Let's go so I can smash something." The party made their way back to the surface and made off into the woods, in the direction of Sarmuth. About halfway to the ruins, the party was accosted by a group of vagabonds. Their leader drew a cheap rapier and said, "Your money or your life." The group of friends burst out laughing. Once they regained their composure, Grumbly said, "Look, we're in a hurry, so just get out of the way before Strug here eats you." Strug stepped towards the bandits. Iranus' fingers twitched and each of Strug's footsteps shook the earth. Strug ripped the rapier from the leader and crushed it between his hands. The vagabonds screamed and ran back into the woods. Trina, Iranus, and Grumbly shared a laugh and the group continued. They made it to the desert and crossed it, the ruins rapidly approaching. They arrived at the entry hall of the ruins and made their way inside. Iranus and Trina took the lead. The group came to a fork, and the pair disintegrated the stone before them, opening a direct path to the core of the structure. The party continued towards the center. They slew a few liches and many demons before arriving at a large chamber. An enormous blue gemstone levitated in the core of the room. Demons surrounded it, standing by vigilantly. Uranus put a hand on Strug's shoulder and the pair vanished. They reappeared in the center of the group of demons and Uranus said, "Good luck my friend," before teleporting back to Grumbly and Trina. The battle began. Uranus hurled radiant energy at the demons as Strug spun about, fists flailing. Grumbly played a haunting tune on his lute and a demon turned to dust. Trina threw balls of flame into the core of the group and incinerated a good fraction of them. When the last demon fell, the party approached the gem. Just as they moved in to examine it, the entire room turned 90 degrees. The former floor became a wall before the party, and they started falling. Grumbly quickly plucked a chord on his lute, and the party's fall slowed. The former ceiling opened and the party flew out into the air. They fell from 100 feet in the air down towards the desert floor. The party looked up to see what had been a temple had risen from the ground to become an enormous stone behemoth. The glowing gem visible behind its eyes, its head over 100 feet above the ground. The party landed on the ground and Trina said, "What do we do?" Uranus walked to the Goliath and looked up at it. In a calm voice he said, "I wish we had time for a long rest." A shimmering violet barrier surrounded the living temple and it froze in place. Uranus stooped to a knee in exhaustion. Grumbly led the others up next to him and played one more tune on his lute. A door appeared in the air and Grumbly held it open. The party made their way through, Grumbly following them. "Make yourselves at home," Grumbly said, excited. The four friends dispersed to their own rooms in the magnificent mansion, and they each went to sleep. 8 hours later, the party awoke. "Are you feeling alright, Uranus?" Trina asked. "I'm alive," the sorcerer replied, "tired, but alive." "Let's get going." The party exited the mansion and looked up at the living temple. The violet barrier was about to fade away. They prepared themselves. Just as the barrier dropped, Trina and Uranus both cast spells of growth on Strug and he grew into an 80-foot tall behemoth. He raised his fists and swung at the temple. The temple raised its stone fists and countered. The battle began. Trina hurled motes of flame, only to be knocked to the ground as the temple unleashed a massive beam of radiant energy. Uranus blinked to Trina and touched the younger man on the shoulder. Trina's burns healed and he got back to his feet. "Would you stop being useless?" Uranus shouted at Trina. "Shut up and let's destroy this thing," Trina yelled back. Grumbly turned himself invisible and climbed into the temple. He climbed up the walls inside the temple and made his way back towards the crystal. Strug swung again and again at the temple with massive fists. Chunks of stone broke free as he did immense damage. Uranus and Trina disintegrated sections of stone and Grumbly made it to the gem. Grumbly began playing a tune and undoing the magic animating the temple, and the massive monstrosity started to collapse. Grumbly acrobatically dove from the temple, plucking some notes and falling slowly towards the ground. Strug held out a massive hand and caught Grumbly, placing him gently back down on the desert floor. Just before he started to shrink, Strug plucked the gem from the wreckage and placed it before the party. He slowly shrunk down to his original size and Grumbly opened up another mansion. The party rested briefly and then Trina and Uranus moved to examine the gem. "This is what we're after. This opens the portal to the inferno," Uranus confirmed. "We should be able to work together to dispel it, yeah?" Trina asked. "We can try," Uranus replied. "Grumbly, give us a hand." Grumbly played an inspiring tune and they began the dispelling ritual. Each of the mages concentrated on the gem, on its unique resonance. They felt the magic begin to unwind, but just as they thought they were successful, there was a bright flash and the party vanished. The party reappeared in a hot, dark world. A sea of flames surrounded the rocky shelf they stood upon. An enormous devil rose from the sea of flames and looked down upon them. It laughed. "You idiots aren't very good at this, are you?" 4 greater fiends rose from the flames with the devil, and the party heard an enormous roar coming from the distance. The party looked to the south to see an enormous army of fiends on their way. Trina aimed his hands at the greater devil and poured as much power as he could muster into a sickly green ray. The ray raced towards the devil, but the devil simply beat its wings and moved to the north into the sea of flames. The ray missed, impacting an enormous pillar of stone and turning it to dust. The devil laughed. "You need to work on your aim, idiot." Grumbly ran up to the first of the greater fiends and placed his hand upon it. He taunted, "Let's see how brave you are when your friend is a rabbit." The devil waved his hand and Grumbly's spell fizzled. "You need to be smarter than that, tiny one," the devil taunted back. Strug drew his maul and charged towards one of the unengaged fiends. He swung at it and landed a solid hit. The fiend recoiled in pain and countered with its mace. Iranis walked to the north, gazing at the approaching army. He waved his hands and conjured an illusory reality, sucking the fiendish army into a battle against their worst fears. Illusory celestials soared through the air, hurling bolts of radiant energy at the fiends. Holy swords cleaved hellhounds in two. The perfect illusion halted the army as they engaged their imaginary foes. Trina threw lightning at the devil, who countered with lightning of his own. The devil sprayed magical ink at Trina, marking him. Two of the fiends charged towards the wizard. Strug continued to grapple with another fiend, his ferocity making up for the size difference. He cast aside his maul and attacked with his gauntleted fists. He pushed himself with all his might and beat down the fiend, crushing its bones. Grumbly played a slow tune and the fiend stopped in its tracks. He pulled his viciously enchanted rapier and began to attack his helpless foe. The two fiends advanced on Trina, hurling fireballs as the elf ran from them. Iranis, seeing his former apprentice in danger, teleported to one of the fiends. He looked it in the eyes and said, "You're mine now." The fiend drew its mace and swung at its former ally. The pair of fiends began to grapple and Trina called out, "Thanks." Iranis yelled, "Quit being useless and blast the devil." Trina nodded, an angry but determined look on his face. He ran towards the devil and pointed both hands at it. Searing tongues of flame burst forth and slammed into the devil. Huge chunks of fiendish flesh burnt away from the sheer heat behind Trina's flame. Strug charged over to the fiend Grumbly was dueling and finished it off. Grumbly climbed up on Strug's back and the pair made their way towards the devil. Grumbly played an intense, catchy tune and the devil began to shift back and forth in a loose dance, unable to concentrate on the battle itself. Trina tried to finish him but the devil countered his spell and nearly killed him with a blast of acid. Iranis ran up to Trina and closed his wounds. Strug drew his maul one final time and swung. The blow struck true, slamming the devil down to the ground. Iranis' dominated fiend walked up to the devil and finished it off with a mace to the skull. The party stepped away from the massive corpse and linked hands. They vanished and reappeared back in the desert, the enormous gem still there. Grumbly began to play the greatest song of his life, a song retelling the adventures of the party, the dramatic and inspiring tale put to music that fitted perfectly. The halfling's notes resonated to sound like a whole orchestra being played by a single bard. The music resonated through the heavens and was heard. The goddess of music herself descended from the heavens. She plucked the gem between two fingers, smiled at Grumbly, and ascended back into the sky. Iranis teleported the party to his mage tower and ordered his servants to cook up a feast. The party sat down in comfortable chairs and laughed and chatted. They partied into the night and eventually retreated to their own rooms to sleep. My old D&D group pulled out their original character sheets and had a level 21 shot. We had a blast role-playing these characters together again. I definitely recommend the experience to other groups with retired characters. Thanks for watching. If you made it this far, please hit the like and subscribe button for me. Also, I have left my Patreon link in the description. This is not for my Lambo fund, I promise.